Good morning, everyone. And for those of you who were thinking of choosing Peter Ashman's option 3 and spending the night here or in the bar, I'm glad that none of you did, but not to worry. What happens at ALPSP stays at the ALPSP Conference. So, for those of you who chose option 2 and set your alarms to be here, thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. So this plenary will consider the changing role of society publishing, which frankly can be interpreted in myriad ways. And my plenary colleagues and I, we're going to share how publishing programs play an important and perhaps changing role within several large societies, and demonstrate that society publishing programs are very much alive and leading not only in publishing, but in other areas as well. And I think we certainly saw this in Emma Wilson's presentation on academic engagement at the Royal Society of Chemistry. This plenary will also address the critical issue of partnerships, both among and between societies and between societies and commercial publishers. Now, I'm fortunate to be the chair of the penultimate session because I can draw notes and inspiration from previous sessions. And one thing that I've noted is that we in the scholarly publishing community seem to have a very strong affinity for words that begin with the letter C. So in the past 2 days, I've heard community, collaboration, and curation, along with some very fancy double C terms and phrases such as core competency, core capability, customer-centric, and content is a commodity. So please bear with me as I continue with the letter C theme. So I'll start by talking about the importance of culture and connecting to ASCO. Leighton Chipperfield will follow and talk about commitment, collective knowledge, and apparently cake. From Kathleen Fitzpatrick, you will hear about communities and the Modern Language Association's collective and cooperative commons. And I promise you that you won't hear about Creative Commons in any of our presentations. And finally, Simon Inger will wrap it up with case studies addressing crisis, critical mass, and continued investment and continued evolution. Now, when thinking about the changing role of society publishing, whether you work for a society or a commercial publishing partner, whether you consult for societies or provide a service, it's critical to know the society beyond its publishing function. Get to know its mission, its organization, its culture, governance, its goals and initiatives outside of publishing. It's very critical. And appreciate the important and changing role that societies play today in improving our world and our lives. So a bit of housekeeping before I begin my presentation. Please hold your questions until the end. We'll try to have ample time for Q&A. All right. And with that, I'd like to share with you some insights about the American Society of Clinical Oncology. This is the disclaimer slide, and I certainly expect that some or many of you will disagree with my opinions. That's fine. Okay, well, I guess this is a bookend to Peter Ashman's dig at Donald Trump on day one. For those of you who chose option 3 and maybe a little slow this morning, this is asking if culture trumps strategy. And, as I was thinking about this slide, I now realize how ridiculous this is because neither of these words should be associated with this image. So I apologize for that. But this is a somewhat controversial business maxim that's been around for a while. And one version that you may have heard is that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Whatever version that you've heard, it really boils down to this, and that is that culture determines and limits strategy. So I'd like to give you my opinion of strategy and strategic planning before I talk about culture, because I think that there is a view that societies are not very good at strategic planning and strategy execution, but really, how important is it to excel at strategic planning? And I'll argue that the culture of an organization is more important. So to understand both the strategic planning and the culture of societies, you need to understand the organizational structure of most nonprofits. So I think many of you are familiar with this, have seen this chart, but the executive director or CEO reports to a board of directors, and the board of directors appoints various committees, and various executives report to the executive director or CEO. Now, compare the nonprofit structure to a for-profit organization. And in for-profit organizations, the board of directors reports to shareholders. And the shareholders, they have the most power. They want improving financial results, and they usually want it on a quarterly basis. And they can demand changes from the board of directors on business strategy, business decisions, and they can exert pressure on the board to fire the CEO. In a nonprofit organization, the board of directors do not answer to shareholders, they answer to members. And although they answer to the membership, the board of directors often vote on major business decisions and organizational decisions. So for most nonprofits, the board of directors has the power. However, the CEO or the executive director can hold the power if he or she is a strong leader and is especially adept at navigating board dynamics and board politics. So whether you work for a commercial publisher or a society, it's important to understand how this difference affects strategic planning and culture. So, as I said earlier, there's this perception in our industry that societies are not very good at strategic planning. And in my opinion, most for-profit organizations aren't very good at this either. So let's just take a look at most strategic planning exercises. There's a vision or mission statement that's created. That's a very tortuous process. Strategic initiatives are identified. So what companies do we want to acquire? What geographies do we want to expand into? What new product launches should we decide on? And then there's this process of creating very granular financial forecasts and other metrics. So strategic planning is important, but it's often flawed. Organizations often strive for perfection on things like 5-year revenue forecasts instead of focusing on what, when, and where to place your bets. It's often resource-based, in which you apply cost-based expense forecasting, which you can control, but you apply that to revenue-based forecasting. And the problem is that you forget that customers are in control of revenues, and most are unpredictable. The forecast horizon is often too long, and strategic planning is often disconnected from the culture of the organization or division. So my advice to societies is, don't approach strategic planning as if you're a publicly traded company on Wall Street. So here's a quick overview of the American Society of Clinical Oncology. I'm not going to read this slide. You can read that for yourself. But I would say that we're probably an outlier among societies in terms of, certainly from our revenues. And now I'd like to share with you an overview of ASCO's culture, and this really gets into the heart of my presentation. And I credit our culture to our CEO, or I should say our former CEO. He recently retired. And he believed in unparalleled customer service, that the members are central to everything. And so we have centralized customer service. We answer the phone. We measure our performance on answering the phone. Within journals, we measure author and editor and reviewer satisfaction using NPS scores. We also measure how many phone calls going to our centralized journal service numbers go to voicemail. He also believed that growth is imperative, and there's something called the S-curve, which if you're not familiar with this, you should look into it. He recognized that after 10 years of sustained growth that we had reached the plateau on our S-curve, and we needed to think very carefully about how we could continue to grow. He also believed in connecting internally and externally, so internally with other departments, externally with other organizations. And he also believed in broadening the tent and finding new member constituencies. And he also said, don't be afraid to innovate, don't be afraid to fail, but also don't be afraid to sunset or kill underperforming programs and products. So we do regular program reviews on our key programs, and we decide whether or not to sunset those or to remediate or to keep those programs. So I'm going to focus on one, and that is connecting internally and externally through some examples. And I'll wrap this up by saying that when we did our strategic planning, the consultant worked with both the staff and the board of directors. It was a 2-year process. It wasn't something that we tried to do in a few months. And the goal was to come up with a plan that didn't have a lot of numerical goals and metrics, to have a plan that was simple, high level, and clear. And so our plan has basically 4 elements, and that is, what will ASCO's focus areas be? How will we succeed? How will ASCO measure success? And how will ASCO invest to achieve success? So which leads me to focusing on a key element of ASCO's culture, and that is connecting internally and externally. And on this slide, I illustrate how societies can connect with other nonprofits, including foundations and government. So look at this slide and think to yourselves how societies are really in a unique position to connect and secure support from other nonprofits. Can one society's business expertise and connections help to reach new customers for another society? Is the content from one society of interest to the members of another? And so here's some examples of how we connect at ASCO. So commercial publishers typically cannot collaborate at the content or the product level. However, societies do, and we must, as research and professional fields, converge and collaborate. So in our journals, we are increasingly publishing guidelines and position and policy statements developed by multiple societies. We co-sponsor meetings with other societies. And for this meeting in particular, the goal is to improve care for cancer survivors. And the 3 co-sponsoring societies for this meeting represent different constituents involved in the care of cancer survivors. So family physicians, internists, and oncologists. This is our new Journal of Global Oncology, and to me it's an example of connecting content to the goals of ASCO's International Affairs Group and also the mission of the International Union for Cancer Control, or UICC. And this is a journal that focuses on cancer care in resource-limited settings, in particular low and middle-income countries, and fills a gap in the literature. And ASCO is really in a unique position to connect with other funders, which you can see listed here. And as a result, we received enough funding to publish JGO under a platinum open access model for the first 2 years. And for ASCO, Journal of Global Oncology, we consider this to be a brand platform that will advance the global oncology initiatives and goals of multiple organizations. Here's another example of a journal that plays an important role to society initiatives and to another organization. This is JCO Clinical Cancer Informatics, which will be publishing its first papers before the end of the year. And this is a journal that's going to support and advance ASCO's ambitious big data initiative called CancerLink. And CancerLink is going to derive treatment and research insights from ingesting millions of cancer patient electronic health records. But it's also an opportunity to engage and formalize a strategic partnership and a relationship with CI4CC, which is an organization representing informaticists who work at major cancer centers in the US. The new journal also represents a home for CancerLink research and advances the field of cancer informatics, and it also represents an opportunity for ASCO to grow a new member constituency, and that is cancer informaticists. Now, while I don't manage the patient and survivor publications for ASCO, the journal's program I do manage has been asked to get involved in initiatives that will improve health literacy. And what I'm about to say may sound overly dramatic, but I firmly believe that improving science and health literacy among the public is critical to the future of scholarly publishing and to our well-being and survival. So societies, I think, can and should be shaping the public discourse and perceptions on issues critical to our health and survival, such as climate change, vaccinations, many other examples. Informing the public, educating students will have a positive effect on policy, research funding, and potentially even future society membership. So I know some of the societies represented here already do this, and I applaud you for doing so. So let me just conclude by saying that a culture of connecting both internally and externally is critical to the future of societies. This element of society culture, in my opinion, does trump strategy. Now, this doesn't mean that societies should not embrace strategic planning. It doesn't mean that we can't continue to be competitive. But just think about how increasingly connected our members and researchers are becoming with each other and with those outside their fields and professions. So my question to you is, how will you connect? Thank you, and I'd like to bring Leighton Chipperfield to the podium.
Good morning, everyone. I think as we go through the presentation, you'll see that some of what I'm going to say is related to David, but perhaps at a more detailed level. And I'll give you some examples of how we see this playing out at the Microbiology Society. So I've been at the Microbiology Society for 4 years. We're a self-publishing organisation. And when I came in to the Society, having been in commercial publishing for many years, I kind of had some apprehensions. I wasn't quite sure what I was going to find. And I had some kind of thoughts about what it might be like. And one of the issues was, it's going to be old-fashioned. It's going to be, the systems aren't very modern. And these were some of the things I thought. I thought, oh God, I'll go in on the first day and there'll be teams of people copycatting at their desk. This is all going to be horrendous. They're going to be obsessed with the print. They're going to publish this stuff and it's going to sit collecting dust on a library bookshelf and no one's going to read it. And it's all going to be overseen by pale, male, stale individuals. Right. I'm pleased to say that most of that was not true at my organisation. That's why I'm still there. But I think it's fair to say that for some society publishers in the past, some of that was true. They had problems. And I think they lacked the scale. I think they lacked a commitment to invest in systems and technology. They thought that these print publications would be around forever. They weren't prepared to invest in They weren't prepared to invest in new products. They thought the books and journals that had been serving them for hundreds of years in some cases didn't need changing. and they thought they had the right structures and people. And I'm going to be frank and say I think they had the right structures and people in the 19th century. They did not have them for the 21st century. So what happened? Commercial publishers like me came in and we filled the gap. We said, we're fantastically efficient. We've got these global operations, fantastic sales and marketing people who will reach your customers all over the world. And we're going to make a major investment in technology. When you think about the investment that the big commercial publishers made just in journal platforms, going back a couple of decades, it was huge and highly attractive. But I want to argue in this talk that things are changing for society publishers, and I think they're changing for three reasons. They're changing because of developments in technology. They're changing because publishers are taking advantage of some of the partnerships that we can have with other societies. And they're changing because we're seeing market dynamic changes going forward. Before I talk about that, I just want to give you a bit of information on our program at the Microbiology Society. So we have 6 journals. 4 of those are traditional subscription journals with an open access option. We have a turnover of £3.3 million annually. We have 12 in-house staff, and we combine that with outsourcing aspects of our operations. So to give you an example, we have 2.5 production staff, but we outsource the bulk of the production work to a supplier. And the governance is through our publishing committee, which consists of editors-in-chief and other people, and they report directly to the council. So let me talk about technology first. The ideal scenario for me is to be second to market when it comes to technology. I have no interest in using the society's money to pay for something which will get me first to market. Why should I do that? To give you an example of that, we moved to the Ingenta platform recently, and one of the attractions of moving to Ingenta is that they'd worked really closely with other publishers to develop their pub-to-web platform. So we could come in and effectively piggyback on all that development work that had happened at no extra cost. At the Microbiology Society, we really like things that we can leverage across the whole organisation. We don't just want to do things in silos. And a good example of that is ORCID. Now, everyone knows about ORCID and what it does. I think for us as an organisation, ORCID provides the potential to have a single customer view of our community. What we really want to do at our organisation is understand how many of our authors are members, how many of our members are conference attendees, and so on. And having a unique identifier like ORCID that we can put into our CRM system really makes that process much, much simpler. We like to test and learn with technologies. So an example of that is Figshare. We're using Figshare at the moment for one of our journals, in fact our newest journal, which is an open data journal. And we're using that really as a test bed, both to test Figshare as a tool and how it works for us, and the whole mechanics of having an open data journal. And really importantly, I can't stress this enough, we stick to what we're best at. We don't do things that we think suppliers could do better than ourselves. We experimented for a while at collecting APCs, and we did our best, but it just wasn't working. And so we partnered with CCC to do that, and I have to say that's working really well. So smart use of technologies. I'll just put the slide here of our journal platform. This is our journal platform for the Journal of General Virology. And I think what I want to highlight here is just the level to which we can link the journals with the society. And if you look at it, we have a link to our focus meeting here. It's an event that the society ran. We have links to the society's social media, Facebook and Twitter in the top right, We have links to the Society's blogs and so on, and it's all about that connection, as David was saying, between the journals and the Society. So the next thing I want to talk about is societies working together, and David alluded to this. This, for me, has been the great revelation of working in society publishing. You can have really frank, open discussions that respect confidentiality and all of that, but really frank discussions with your counterparts at other societies about all manner of things. All manner of things. And I just want to show you some of the discussions I've had just in the past few months with my counterparts at other learner societies. It's great fun, and it's so valuable, and you know what? It's free. It's free. The power of our collective knowledge of society publishers is huge. Market dynamics. There are several people better qualified in the room than me to talk about the big deal. But what we know from talking to librarians at the Society is that librarians are becoming increasingly disenchanted with the big deal. They want to find better ways to use their money. And it seems to me that one of the alternatives here is for society journals to come together and create journal collections, subject-specific journal collections, which can then be sold to libraries. There are some people doing this already and doing it quite well, but I have to say I really like the approach of AccuCommons, who have launched the Aggregagent service. I think that's very exciting, and we're really looking forward to seeing how that goes. So I just want to talk to you now about society publishing in the context of innovation. And when I look at it as a director of publishing at the assets of my society, I think we have an awful lot going for us in terms of innovation. We have the subject expertise. We're not trying to cover dozens and dozens of subject areas. We focus on one thing, one community, microbiology. What we do fits perfectly with the organisational mission and strategy. We are not a separate company who are arm's length. We are very much embedded in the organisation. We have fantastic, motivated and knowledgeable staff, and I'm not just saying that because one of them is in the audience. Really, really importantly, we have what I think is first-rate governance. These people understand that you have to invest in publishing. It's not a cash cow. If you want it to be sustainable going forward, you have to invest in it, and they have really backed us. And we have the scale, as I said, through partnerships. What that means for me in the context of innovation and developing new products is that I think we can be quicker to understand the market, we can be quicker to make decisions, we can be quicker to get stuff out to market, and we can be quicker ourselves to change. So again, I think the way that we set ourselves up, our size, our subject focus, everything about how we do our business makes us highly agile. So in the context of launching a new journal specifically, what I imagined when I came into the organisation is that we have these fantastic assets. We have the trustees, the directors of the organisation, people who are high-profile experts in their field. We run policy programmes, so we have access to all the people who contribute to policy. We have our journal editorial boards, we have conferences, and we can look at the content that's popular in those events. And we can engage with experts in our membership. So as we think about launching a new journal, we can tap into all those assets to consider, is this a good idea or not? What I underestimated is that all these people have their own contact networks. And we use all of them, in developing ideas for new journals, new services. fantastic resource. And so what's come out of that most recently is our newest journal, Microbial Genomics. This was developed absolutely in partnership with the community based on what they told us they wanted. So it's an open access journal, it's an open data journal, it offers continuous publication. And it's early days, but we are really, really happy with how the journal is going after a year of publication. So, final slide. What do I think is the future of society publishing? At its heart are our communities, our scientists, our clinicians, the people that we serve, and we have to get these experts centrally engaged in understanding our programs, improving our programs, and doing what they ask us to. At the same time, we have to be incredibly business focused. We have to use technologies in a smart way. We're already doing a lot of that, and sometimes that will mean working with those technologies ourselves. Sometimes it will be working with suppliers. But most importantly, the role of society publishers, and I think societies in general, is about connecting communities, connecting experts with other experts. And if we keep that in mind as publishers and try and support that mission, I think we will not go far wrong. So thank you very much, and I will now introduce Kathleen Fitzpatrick from the Modern Language Association.
Good morning. This will just take me a moment to get back up. Thank you very much for being here bright and early this morning. And I want to thank David for inviting me to join you today. David did this incredibly canny thing in inviting me to speak on this session, which was to send me the abstract, which you have seen in the program, which asked us to consider whether society publishers are really as myopic as the industry seems to think we are, whether we struggle to compete because we're slow to decide and risk averse. And needless to say, this immediately made me say, I have to respond to this. I can't possibly let that go. So anyway, here I am responding to this. The goal, as I understood it when I first read that abstract, was for society publishers here represented either to demonstrate the kinds of forward-thinking, risk-inviting, agile publishing that we're doing on our own, or to argue for positive reasons why we've chosen that seemingly safer course. I want to start instead by stepping outside the abstract assumptions altogether and suggest instead that while societies do some publishing, and while that publishing may provide an important source of revenue for those publishers, for many societies, society is not really fundamentally a publisher and should not be. And more importantly, that as societies, we possess certain kinds of opportunities that publishers do not. That might enable us to think about new ways of facilitating scholarly communication outside of the box of scholarly publishing per se. Now, first, an inevitable bit of background, right? Since the founding of the Royal Society, learned and professional societies have been established for the express purpose of fostering and facilitating communication amongst their members and between their members and the broader intellectual world. And early on in the history of those societies, that communication took the form of letters that were circulated amongst the membership and meetings at which member work was presented and discussed. And over time, those practices developed into the journals and the conferences with which we're familiar today. Now, along the way, the journals in particular accrued a series of formal publishing processes, including editing and peer review, that came to mark them as authoritative resources in their fields and to enable them to provide an important source of revenue for the societies. However, while those societies thus took on a series of publishing functions, I would argue that many of them, in fact, did not in the process become publishers per se. And these publishing functions were rather offshoots of the need to provide for communication amongst society members. And today, most such societies remain first and foremost membership associations, mission-driven, not-for-profit organizations that are working in the interest of their members and, most crucially, that are governed by their members. And this mission and governance structure strongly indicate that member needs must outweigh business needs, so long as the revenue that's provided by the business aspects of the society is robust enough for the association to continue doing its work. Now, this tension between supporting the needs of the members and ensuring sufficient revenue in order to be able to provide that support has placed many society publishers in an interesting position with respect to, for instance, open access. And on the one hand, income from publications enables us to do the work our members need. And on the other, a large part of what our members have always needed is for us to facilitate the easiest, most fruitful, and most open means of communicating with one another. So as we face this tension, we at the MLA have made the decision that if we focus on our collective goals as societies, in improving scholarly communication and increasing the wealth of knowledge that we hold in common, we can find new means of doing this work that take advantage of our strengths as membership organizations. And so, in thinking about the future of scholarly communication, we, like all societies, are looking for ways to make our publications more open, but we feel strongly that our greatest opportunities may not lie necessarily in focusing on the future of those publications as they have long existed, but instead in establishing a new, open, community-oriented, sustainable research infrastructure for our constituents. So we're working on developing a model that's based on collective, cooperative, sustainable support for open platforms and an architecture that makes those platforms' data not just available, but interoperable, shareable, and reusable. These are the underpinnings of a project that we're working on right now called Humanities Commons, which is a developing network that's sponsored by a collective of scholarly societies, but that's open to participation from any researcher or practitioner who wants to join. And it's a network that's mission-driven, that's committed to the needs and interests of that community. So Humanities Commons is our effort, first and foremost, to leverage the collectives that are represented by scholarly societies on behalf of the common good. So a bit of background. For those of you who may not be fully familiar with the MLA, we're the largest scholarly society in the humanities, representing more than 25,000 members across North America and around the world. Members who teach and study a very wide range of languages, literatures, and cultures. And with support from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, we launched a social network called MLA Commons for our members in 2013 in order to provide them with a platform for communication and collaboration, both in order to extend year-round the kinds of conversations that take place at our annual meetings and to provide means for members to share their scholarly work with one another. But within about 30 seconds of launching the platform, we started to hear from our members about their desire to connect with colleagues in other areas of the humanities. Our members work in increasingly interdisciplinary ways, and so we started looking for ways to support those connections across fields. Now, MLA Commons is built on the Commons in a Box platform, which is itself a project of the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. And CBox is in turn built on WordPress and BuddyPress, which together provide an open source solution for organizations that are seeking rich social networking and publishing capabilities. MLA Commons supports a wide range of member interactions, including public group discussions that members can freely join, private group discussions, some of which members can request access to, and others of which are restricted based on particular member authorizations, such as being a member of a committee, for instance. Members can also contribute to or create a wide variety of web-based publications. They can participate in collaborative document authoring and more. Members can create extended CV-like profiles that link to their work, both that going on within the Commons and that taking place across the web. And they can deposit their work, preprints, data sets, presentations, syllabi, lecture notes, you name it, to CORE, which is the repository that we've integrated into the Commons. And they can share that work with the Commons groups to which they belong. So we partnered with the Center for Digital Research and Scholarship at the Columbia University Libraries in building CORE, which is a Fedora Solr-based repository. And with the support of the National Endowment for the Humanities, we built a WordPress plugin that provides the front-end user interface for depositing, entering metadata, discovering, and sharing work that is contained within CORE. Now, what's most important for me about CORE is its fusion of a library quality repository adhering to commonly accepted metadata standards, employing digital object identifiers, and so on, with a social network, right? Which means that not only is the stuff being put into the repository, and not only can the stuff be found there if you know to go look for it, but it's also being actively used because members can deposit their work and directly share it with the groups that they belong to on the Commons. And those groups get notifications of the new material in which they might be interested. Even more recently, we received an implementation grant from the NEH, which is going to enable us in the next couple of years to work with a group of libraries to make CORE interoperable with a range of other scholarly data services. Now, in the meantime, we've also been investigating ways of expanding the Commons to create those interdisciplinary linkages for which our members asked. And so with further support from the Mellon Foundation, we first undertook a planning process, and we're now deep into a pilot project that's designed to connect multiple proprietary Commons instances, each serving the membership of a scholarly society. Our partners in this pilot project are the Association for Jewish Studies, the Association for Slavic, East European, and Eurasian Studies, and the College Art Association. So while any interested researcher or practitioner in the humanities will be able to create a free account on the Humanities Commons Hub, regardless of their institutional affiliation or their employment status or their society memberships or any other determining factor, members of those societies that are participating in this network will receive additional access to those societies' resources and the ability to participate in their conversations. And they'll be able to access everything to which they're entitled with a single sign-on, right? And to maintain a single profile that identifies them across the network. We're obviously pretty early in the design process here, but you get the idea. Jane Smith, an assistant professor of Slavic literature, is a member of both the MLA and ACES. Creating an account on Humanities Commons will give her access to MLA Commons and to ACES Commons, and she'll be able to create a profile on the network that will appear in all three sites. And the academic interests that she lists there will link her to others across the network who have the same interests that she does, enabling her to find potential collaborators and colleagues with whom to share work, regardless of which societies they may belong to. She'll be able to deposit work in CORE and to share it with the groups to which she belongs across any of the sites to which she has access. And that work will be linked to her profile. She'll be able to track the impact that it has, and she'll be able to do a whole range of other things. She can start an individual blog. She can participate in a group blog. She can contribute to an experimental publication that's housed anywhere within these networks. And this is, we hope, just the start. Our hope is that through integrations between Humanities Commons and other key scholarly data sources, that we'll be able to create an environment in which Jane might be able to leverage her university credentials to seamlessly use her library's research resources and then discuss those resources in the Humanities Commons groups to which she belongs, or reference those resources in a networked publication, or where, for instance, she might be able to deposit work in the disciplinary repository like CORE and have that work automatically represented in her institutional repository. And it's not just fully employed folks or folks whose societies are already part of the network who'll be able to benefit from it. John Doe here, who is a graduate student in history, will likewise be able to participate in Humanities Commons to create an account, create a profile. He won't be able to participate in the discussions on the sites where he's not a member, but he can deposit and share work with the larger Humanities Commons community. And our hope, quite frankly, is that his active participation and the active participation of his colleagues will wind up drawing his scholarly society into the Federation, right, to come where their members already are, and draw them into more active participation in society business and support the kinds of interdisciplinary work those members want to do in active ways. And we're going to need those societies to join us in order to support the network and allow it to succeed. Our goal is to achieve full sustainability for Humanities Commons within 5 years, shifting over that time from grant-based support to a funding model based largely on annual fees paid into a common fund by societies. We expect, based on the experiences of projects like Archive, that we'll need to be prepared to do a fair bit of fundraising as well, in order not just to support the existing infrastructure, but also the ongoing development, the maintenance, the technical support, the community facilitation, and everything else that a network like this is going to require. But we're in the process of developing a governance model that will grant both participating societies and individual members a voice in setting the network's future directions. And that, I think, is the most crucial aspect of the openness of Humanities Commons. Not just that anyone can create an account free of charge, and not just that the broader public will be able to access the material that's shared there, but that the network is and will remain not-for-profit, that it will be sustained and governed by scholars and by the societies to which they belong. The development of truly open, mission-driven scholarly communities requires that societies and scholars alike embrace a shift in the locus and value in joining a scholarly society. I mean, rather than, as it has historically been, the value in that membership residing in the receipt of member-only materials, things like journal subscriptions or convention registration discounts. We strongly believe that in the age of scholarly networks, the primary value in membership may lie instead in the ability to participate in community conversations and processes. And participation is one of the key things that mission-driven membership organizations can leverage in thinking about scholarly communication outside the framework imposed by scholarly publishing, because we have members, right? And they've joined the organization in order to communicate with one another. Our job is to find the best, freest, most open, and most sustainable means of helping them do so. You can visit hcommons.org for more information and regular updates on Humanities Commons if you're interested in seeing what we're up to, and I will look forward to hearing your thoughts when we conclude. And I will turn it over now to Simon Inger, who will close the session.
There? Yes, great. Hi, everybody, and thanks for that introduction. And my job today is to bring you 4 case studies in society journals publishing. These are drawn from our experiences of projects undertaken by both Simon Inger Consulting and Renew Consulting for Societies, which is our brand that looks after societies who have already outsourced to partner with commercial publishers and perhaps need to re-tender, or for those societies thinking of going out to tender. In these case studies, I'm just looking at these 4 society programs from a very neutral perspective. I'm only really looking at them from 2 particular angles. I guess the recommendations I make are compatible generally with trying to maximize revenue and the good standing of the journals program in quality terms, rather than meeting any political or ethical agenda of a society may have, such as a desire perhaps to give away content, So in this presentation, which is obviously quite brief, I don't make a very deep dive into any of them. And there are just 4 examples. I could find many, many more with different situations. I just picked 4 to illustrate some particular outcomes. Now, I've been in business for a very long time now. As occasionally I remember, the very last time I applied for a job was 1987. Since, sometime a little while after that, I've been running my own businesses one way or another. So I guess sort of making money and surviving has become very natural and second nature to me. So when I'd written this talk, I looked at it and thought, it does feel a bit like Basil Fawlty with his lesson in the bleeding obvious. But although a lot of what I may say it will seem quite obvious, I think, a lot of the errors that I'm talking about are all there. They're happening all the time. They're still out there in society publishing across the world. We see it all the time. So there must be something worth saying here, I think. So I'm just going to look at 4 case studies, as I said. The first one is the Self-Publishing Society. It's all looking very rosy in this particular example, I have to say. A gross revenue of around $7 million. I put it in dollars because my own currency is a bit volatile at the moment. The net surplus to the society of around $1.8 million. And the revenue is stable or rising, so very pleasant. At the same time, their portfolio is growing. And within that, the journals themselves are growing, mostly anyway. They have a committed journals board chair, does sound fantastic, doesn't it? Who helps drive innovation, highly engaged EICs of the journals. They've got staff, sales manager, and outsourced sales, and high staff involvement help drive the program forward. They do enjoy very good market reach, but probably not as good as a commercial publisher can manage with its big deals. And maybe, and thanks to Leighton for mentioning AgriGagent. Many of you will know I've an involvement with AccuComs and helped bring that product to market. And maybe the society will use that particular initiative as well to help further. They do have very good readership across the world, but even so, still not even all of its editors are in institutions that subscribe. So there's clearly an upside still available to them to get them further across the world. So that slight lack of penetration must have some effect on the ability for people to cite the journals and hence impact factors. However, absolute terms, their impact factor is good, life is good, but with greater reach would be probably even better. So where do they go from here? Well, they're definitely above a critical revenue point, so they can afford to continue to invest, and actually do continue to invest, in professional management, leading to innovation in their portfolio, the scope of the journals, keeping them on track, their business models, delivery technologies, and outsourced sales partnerships to maximize the ability to reach a global market. So they're doing things pretty well all round, you'd have to say. They could make more money through a publishing partnership and losing a lot of the costs for doing so, but maintaining their independence is a key priority to them and would rather stay the way they are. So I have my little icons here that I'll use throughout this presentation. They're all little jugs, either half or full or half empty, depending on how you look at it. I'm just looking at how their surplus maps to what they would like it to be, and how their impact factors map to what they would like them to be. And I have a past, present, and future. So this particular society used to make more money in the past, but where we're at now, it's stabilized and looks set to continue steadily into the future. And their impact factors are good and have maintained well and look to endure as well into the future. So, my second case, a society that shifted from self-publishing to a commercial partner. Now, I had to be extremely careful in putting together this example so that people weren't busily trying to work out who it was, because it becomes too easy. So I have to admit that this is actually a mashup of two. but still illustrating all the key points. So the situation broadly was that their net revenue was about $50,000 from a 2.2 million gross revenue situation. Now they've gone with a publishing partner. Their revenue share is $1.2 million, and they've maintained about $350,000 of internal costs, so they got a net of $850K at the end of the day, obviously quite a significant improvement. Their content portfolio is steady. Almost all their journals are growing. They still have a highly engaged EICs, but there has been a loss of internal expertise, although the key staff at the moment remain key thinkers. Now, this is an error we see a lot. This particular organisation hasn't done this yet, but there's a risk. A common error is that a society thinks it doesn't have to worry about the content anymore, having outsourced. It's kind of, people tend to go, phew, thank God we don't have to worry about that program anymore. We've outsourced the thing. And things tend to have a tendency to go a bit awry. And they also, I've found this in a number of organisations now that have gone out with a commercial or an outsourced publishing partner, commercial or not, where there's a lack of clarity in the boundary of responsibility. The publisher suggests very strongly good ideas that the society could perhaps implement, but the society doesn't really have, well, it hasn't the staff framework anymore to push it through, and the academic editors don't necessarily act upon it or don't see it as being strong advice, perhaps just a hint. It's really interesting how that dynamic sometimes fails to work, and the two halves aren't plugged together. This tends to lead to a loss of leadership in the program itself. The scope drifts away from where the science is going, often ends up taking on the persona of the editor-in-chief too much, and things can go a little bit wrong when the society is not able to keep its eye on the ball. The finances longer term, likely to be steady, maybe slight falls, but allowing for inflation, we see quite a lot of societies having noticeable falls in real terms. They may be maintaining a flat revenue for 10 years or so, but obviously there is still some underlying inflation, even if it's not huge at the moment. So, I mean, from the past, their surplus was tiny, and they got to a present where their surplus was fabulous in comparison. But the future probably will erode that surplus somewhat. In terms of impact, their journals program looks to stay quite healthy, maybe some slight downturn in the future if they don't keep their eye on it. Okay, the long-term commercial partner one scenario. For this society, their financial position has been eroded over the years, partly due to a badly negotiated contract. Now, the number of times I see that where academic officers really have failed to make anything like a decent contract, negotiate a good contract, loopholes all over the place, and a poor outcome. We get to deal with a fair few of those, I have to say, that come through the door. Now, what started out as perhaps 800 subscriptions is now less than 100. That's not particularly a problem because they've become part of the big deal with their publishing partner. So they get obviously an undefinable share of many thousands of big deals and get probably still the revenue they were looking for, but through that channel. Now, the society, in this case, lost its journals manager some years after the partnership was made and now relies on academic members to watch the partnership. But they are adrift of current trends on technology and business models and so on, and aren't quite sure what they should be asking of their commercial partner. And actually, when the commercial partner comes and says to them what they should be doing, they don't really fully grasp the implications of it either way. And in this particular case, their content is still strong, but not quite where the science is anymore, just a little drifting going on. In terms of their staffing, I mean, that's the interesting thing. A lot of societies that do outsource end up deciding, oh, we'll keep editorial control internally, but actually they mean very operational, pushing the manuscripts around really and controlling that aspect rather than managing the thinking and taking it forward. And I know it's very, very hard. Societies often set out to keep somebody on staff with a strong business knowledge of journals to keep the whole program on track. But with 90% of the operation effectively outsourced, it becomes difficult to retain that person. And so you get to see quite a few societies where there is little or no journals expertise on the staff within the society to help work with their commercial partner or help regulate that relationship. Now, interestingly here, the society has become used to a certain income level from their program, and since that is in steady decline in real terms, they're unwilling to invest any of it in bolstering its own staffing and management to improve the program again. So, although the society is considering a retender, they're also limited as to who might take over their publishing if they want to retain their income level in the short term. Because of their reliance on the big deal, they can only really move to another publisher that does the big deal. So, I'm afraid, yeah, steadily declining surplus in this case over time, but you know, going with their commercial partner did increase visibility and readership and delivered them the increased impact for their journals. And then this one. So other C's, calamity, chaos, coming our way here. Oh dear. A gross revenue of just $137,000. Currently losing the society $70,000 a year. Everything is done at the lowest possible cost. No investment is possible. Even the society's own reserves have been dwindled trying to prop it up. The content itself is still great. Reasonable impact factor, but actually quite highly regarded content. But the low subscriber numbers mean lower readership and citations than its competitors. It has very, very poor reach indeed. It's, yes, terrible, terrifying, in fact. And of course, that puts them in a downward spiral. That reduced visibility obviously leads to reduced submissions and ultimately reduces the impact factor, which then obviously leads to a further cancellation of subscriptions and reduces circulation and so on. So it's a bit unpleasant, to say the least, the situation. Where they're going? Well, the situation is critical, and publishing threatens to drag the society itself into extinction unless they do something. They can't invest their way out of trouble, and growing its way out of trouble is likely to be too long-term anyway from here. Now, with all the sales efforts in the world, you're going to very slowly grow the number of subscriptions just because of the general inertia in the market. So they're effectively forced to find a publishing partner, especially one with big deals, to maximize readership quickly and revenue slowly. Somebody that can get them to the market and get the visibility to get the journal the citations it deserves, because the editor-in-chief is actually still doing a pretty darn good job out there. But the visibility of the product is small. So as for my little icons, the past, they used to make a surplus. The present, I'm afraid, surplus is rock bottom, nil or negative. I didn't have a little negative man there, a negative icon. But if they do go and find a publishing partner, that does promise to improve their surplus over a period of time and into the distant future. Again, the content's good, so potentially quite an upshift in the future. Impact factor was good. It's declined recently, but I think just down to lack of exposure And so logically, the improvement in exposure may well restore the impact to at least the same level that it used to be at. So 4 very, very different examples there of just what we see. So a couple of conclusions to make. First of all, what are the essential components of independence? I think this echoes what Leighton said considerably. Critical mass in revenue, but also in content, to make sure that the program's got to be right there on the subject area. Continued investment and the evolution of the program is critical. Keeping up to date with initiatives and developments, and maximising reach and readership through sales partnerships, really the part. Without the readership, you obviously can't get the citations, and you can't deliver back to the author the result that they want to see, of course. And the essential components of partnership. And the key one there right at the top is keeping attentive and don't relax. Because you've outsourced it doesn't mean to say you don't think about it anymore. It's such a critical error that we see over and over. That in itself means internally you use some of that additional money you're getting from having done the outsourcing to continue investment and evolution of the program and keeping up to date with initiatives and development. And a critical part of that is retaining journal-savvy people, or at least one person on staff, to both manage the relationship and also to help drive forward the development of the program for the future, and make sure you're getting all the right amount of money back from your partner and keep on top of that negotiation. I think, and just one final thing on that, if there are any societies out there that are about to go out and find a commercial partner, one of the things they do typically is to say, well, I'm currently, with all of my internal costs, I have a net surplus of, in that past case, 50,000 or whatever it was, and my publishing partner's promising me 1.2 million. Wow, I'm going to be fabulously well off. Well, you are, but you do still need to factor in costs internally to make sure you continue to manage that relationship properly. So, if you were going from a 50k internal to perhaps a 400k through your partner, that may not actually mean you've got more money to spend at the end of the day if you're going to manage the relationship properly and keep investing in the program. So that's pretty well everything I had to say. I'll just leave that slide up there, which just says a few things about the two halves of our business, because I might as well get a little plug in if that's all right. So, but with that, thank you very much, and I think we get to do general questions. So.
Thank you very much. Is this on? Yep. Thank you very much, Simon. Thank you to the other panelists, Kathleen, Leighton, and we certainly have ample time for questions, and I'm happy to field questions from the audience if there are any. I see one in the back.
Susie Scomo, Bio One. Kathleen, I'm interested in any examples you might be willing to share of the kinds of work that the folks have been doing on the Commons across disciplines.
So the Interdisciplinary Commons has not yet launched. We're moving into open beta in November, and so hopefully very early in 2017 I'll have things that I can tell you about what's happening in that kind of cross-society collaboration space. The things that our members have been doing on the Commons have included creating spaces for graduate students in the field to come together and discuss the kinds of issues that are particular to their needs within within the association. We have spaces where faculty, and particularly early career faculty of color, are creating mentoring spaces where they're able to reach out to others in the community and work with one another. We have several experimental publications that have taken root on the Commons, including an anthology project called Digital Pedagogy in the Humanities. That is a keywords project that's going through an open review process in batches that's working toward a final publication in the next year or so. So there have been lots of different kinds of things that have sprung up, and lots of different ways in which our members are taking a look at the fact that they can reach out directly to one another and create new kinds of ongoing relationships that weren't quite as possible outside of that space. It's been quite exciting to follow, and we're really looking forward to seeing what happens when we get multiple societies able to carry on conversations with one another. I mean, what would it be for graduate students in Jewish studies to be able to talk with graduate students in Slavic studies and find out where their points of overlap and intersection and potential to learn from one another might be?
Question, I think that hand up, your hand up first. You went up first. So.
You've, I think, all focused very much on kind of journal publishing activities for societies. Have any of you got anything to say about book publishing programs?
Well, ASCO publishes one book, so well, actually two books, and then we just sunset that book, so we're down to one book. Yeah, I mean, the comment that I can make about our book publishing program, it's really driven by some of the physician staff and also by the board of directors. There's this perception that in oncology that books generally are delivering late and outdated information, and therefore why should ASCO publish or embark on a book publishing program? The society very much wants to maintain the image that we're providing cutting-edge, late-breaking research, and books just don't do that.
So coming from the humanities, where we're less concerned about late-breaking, cutting-edge research, I suppose, we do a lot of book publishing. We have several long-standing book series. Most of them are edited anthologies. Most of them are pedagogically focused. And so they're part of what we understand is our service mission to the field, again, to create materials that enable folks in the field to spin up new kinds of classes, to incorporate new authors into their existing classes, to think about approaching their classes in different ways. And so we understand the revenue from the book publishing program is always important to the kinds of work that we're able to do otherwise. But we also really see that book publishing as very much at the heart of our mission of outreach to the field and to helping the field develop in new directions.
And we don't do it, but I think if we did do it, it would not be something that we do ourselves, if that makes sense. So we would have to outsource this to someone else.
Yeah, that's a good point, Leighton. In fact, we have been approached by several publishers who wanted to explore starting up a co-publishing book program with ASCO, and it just fell low on the list of priorities for us. But that isn't to say that in the future we wouldn't consider it again. I think there was a question up front. Yes, sir. The microphone's coming up.
I'm David Thomas with Thomson Reuters. We deal with a lot of societies across the globe. The question I have is, if you have two different societies in pretty much the same subject area, It could be geographically different. So my question to the panel is, how do you try to differentiate your society from other societies in the same space? I mean, what do you focus on to clearly have some kind of unique selling feature or unique service for your members?
Well, I'll start, and I'll use ASCO as an example. So we don't compete so much with other societies in the United States as we do perhaps internationally. And so, the European Society of Medical Oncology, I suppose we would call them a competitor, but we do collaborate on projects, and we communicate very regularly. And so, points of differentiation would be your journals, your publications. It would be your meetings. We're always thinking about potential new member benefits for our members. And so, one of the things that we, of course, consider is what is the role of ASCO to our core membership, and our core membership is comprised of US-based oncologists. And so they join the society because they know that the society is advocating on their behalf for, on issues that are very relevant and important to, US-based oncologists, because the healthcare system is so different, for example. And that's something that we, make clear that, we are, champions of your practices, and we're trying to move the needle on, healthcare issues and reforms that impact your practice. So, that's a huge point of differentiation between ASCO and, say, ESMO, and they're dealing with, I'm sure, a completely different, set of issues. And, we also, I would say, perhaps compete on global initiatives. And so I know ESMO is, actively trying to have conferences and scientific meetings in other geographies. And, we've made the decision that, right now that's probably not something we want to compete on, and it's not something, that our core membership is interested in.
So I think for the Microbiology Society, we have a much bigger competitor than us in the ASM, the American Society of Microbiology. And I think in one sense we see them as a competitor. They have a bigger journals program than us. They are clearly internationalizing and want to grow their membership outside the US. And so we need to think about that. But again, I think as David said, there are more opportunities for partnership than there are for competition. And a really good example of that is antibiotic resistance. So antibiotic resistance is a big priority for the UK government. It's a big priority for the US government. And it's something that both societies are kind of doing their own thing on in their own countries to drive that agenda forward. So I think that's one thing. The other thing I would say is that there are many societies who we kind of consider to be in our hinterland. In other words, they're not microbiology societies, but they touch microbiology. And, infection is a really good example of that, where there's dedicated infection societies, and part of those members will consider themselves microbiologists. And so the opportunity for us is to engage with those societies to make sure that between us we are really catering for the needs of those groups who sometimes can fall between the cracks.
I'll make one more comment about society competition. I'm not sure that's the right term, but it's very important for ASCO to play nicely in the society sandbox, so to speak. And so when we launched the Journal of Global Oncology, we informed other oncology organizations, including ESMO, that was our intent, that we were launching the Journal of Global Oncology. When we launched the Journal of Clinical Cancer Informatics, we informed the American Medical Informatics Association. They have a journal that's in that space. And, it's an opportunity to have a dialogue perhaps around, future, collaboration. But we just, we feel it's very important to play nice in the sandbox with other societies and to have that open dialogue and communication.
Yeah, I would say that the MLA is primarily differentiated from the other organizations that are within its space simply by size and by scope. We have, I wouldn't say that we have competitors among those societies. We have dozens of allied and affiliate organizations that are a key component of the work that we do in reaching out to our members. Those allied and affiliate organizations tend to be smaller subfield groups that focus in more particular ways on some of the subsets of the large-scale subject matter that the MLA takes on. So we have very, very close and symbiotic relationships with a lot of those allied organizations, and it's one of the reasons why we're really hoping to be able to bring together a bunch of those societies in Humanities Commons to take advantage of the incredibly rich Venn diagram of all of our overlapping memberships and be able to serve the multiple interests of those members, from the large-scale overall field group to the smaller subfields, all within one network.
I'll just add one quick word to that, which is basically that I think there's a lot of co-opetition going on, as the Americans would say.
Thanks for that additional C word. Yeah. Are there any other questions? All right. Audrey, do you want to conclude? We're 5 minutes from end of time. Oh, sure. All right. Thanks.